Well, listen, thank you very much. The brief today was to try and talk a little bit about strategic opportunities around sustainability, and also to give some insight into some of the light bulb moments that I guess we see around some of our clients and from this CEO study. So let me make 3 points, but before I do, I just want to frame the debate a little bit. I think when we think about sustainability, a little bit, as was said by Michael, I think this is not a green issue. This is a core business issue. So this is about the disruptive trends of externalities that are driving opportunities for revenue growth, for cost reduction, for better risk management, and for intangible assets, for driving intangible assets in the form of brand and reputation. So I think that's the first thing to say from the outset. Exactly as Jim said, last year we conducted the world's largest ever CEO study on sustainability issues for Ban Ki-moon and for the UN leadership team. And that study included face-to-face interviews with 50 Fortune 500 CEOs, and then an online study of another 766 CEOs across 100 countries, across 25 industries. So a broad sample and representative of global business right across industries. And the first point I want to make is it's quite interesting that the extent to which this has permeated the C-level agenda, the CEO suite and other top executives, is quite clear. This is no longer about awareness raising. This is no longer actually even about strategy. Actually, the biggest challenge that CEOs told us about was actually execution, driving this into core business, making this a part of the way you think about new business development, making this a way of thinking about marketing, research and development, making this a core part of the supply chain function. So whilst 93% of those 750 plus CEOs told us that they saw sustainability as critical to the future success of their business, they told us that execution was the biggest barrier. So 49% of CEOs told us that barriers to integration and implementation across the value chain were what was stopping them from making real progress and turning this into comparative advantage. So that's the first point. The second point is, one of the worrying things for me that comes out of the CEO study, and this is where it's interesting to compare the practitioner study that you've conducted here at Green Monday with the CEO results, is that I think there's a real gap in terms of the grip that executives have on the reality of how much progress has been made around sustainability. So actually, we talked to CEOs and asked them to what extent they thought they should be integrating sustainability into their business. Again, this core business definition of sustainability. And 96% of CEOs told us that they should be fully integrating it into areas like supply chain and across their business. Now, that I think I would probably expect. What I didn't expect was that 81% of them told us that they'd already fully integrated sustainability into strategy and into operations and into supply chains. And I think that compares with your figure of the executives here who felt that 48% felt that they'd fully embedded it within strategy. My own view and my experience, we've done 200 client projects in the last 12 months in my region in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. I'd be hard-pressed to pick out more than 5 to 10% of companies that could genuinely say they've fully integrated this into the way they think about generating revenue, the way they think about the next generation of business models, and the way they think about core business performance. And I think that that's quite worrying, because for the light bulb moment of how you go about really driving advantage, you have to have a realistic understanding of the baseline. And I think that perhaps we've got a little bit carried away with ourselves in terms of the real level of performance and the real level of integration into core business. So that would be my second point, is just to be a little wary of actually the rhetoric internally and even amongst, I think, what are very smart and very knowledgeable practitioners on this issue. I think the third point that I would make would be that from the interviews and from the conversations we had, I think what we found was that the CEOs that are now really tapping into some of the disruptive trends in areas like clean energy, in areas like resource efficiency, have reframed the way their organizations think about sustainability. From being previously, I conducted the study previously in 2007, and I would say a lot of the CEOs, probably the dominant portion at that point, were focused on sustainability as being about risk management, as being about cost reduction, and being about brand and reputation. And those CEOs that are really tapping into disruptive trends have reframed that debate about being around growth and innovation opportunities. Jim used a number of the examples from the CEOs we spoke to, from Philips, from Siemens, others, where this is now a major part of their future growth strategies, or in some cases, a major part of their existing business models. But I think what's interesting is that it's going beyond the usual suspects, because there are interesting opportunities to tap into these markets beyond, and it's interesting you make that point at the beginning, it isn't just the energy sector players that are benefiting from this new wave of growth. And I think one of the light bulb moments for me in the work we've done with clients is that actually in many cases the starting point for that journey is a very clear, systematic and quantifiable understanding of the market opportunity. Two examples of where I think that that's played out. One is with Vodafone, where last year we mapped out the opportunities for low-carbon products and services enabled by wireless telecommunications. So in areas like smart grid, in areas like smart metering, in some of the changes that are taking place in intelligent transport systems. And what we saw in that space was that as well as telecommunications solutions being at the heart of significant emissions reductions, for example, enabling distributed energy, actually in Europe alone, in the EU25, there was an opportunity to save Vodafone's customers and the customers in the sector, the ICT sector as a whole, 43 billion euros in energy costs, and that would require 1 billion new machine-to-machine connections. And so what we're seeing again is really the spillover effect from the energy space into a disruptive change in the telecommunications sector, because 1 billion new machine-to-machine connections is a disruptive trend in telecommunications. And actually by mapping out very clearly where that sector is heading, you start to understand how you drive strategies that tap into some of those sources of growth. And I think the final example, and we've left some copies on the tables as well as of the UN CEO study itself, a piece of work that we've just finished with Barclays that maps out the transition to a low-carbon technology Europe, and actually maps out the different sources of finance that are required in Europe to 2020 just to meet the targets in the areas of energy and transport and buildings. We're talking about 2.9 trillion of investment from a demand-side modeling perspective, based on real-world adoption curves for those technologies across 15 key technologies in Europe, which will require substantial new flows of private capital, both procurement capital to buy some of these assets like wind farms, solar parks, but also development capital that supports the growth of some of these new businesses. And that's an area that Barclays, but also others like Merrill Lynch, and Matt, I'm sure will tell you, our generous host today, will tell you a number of financial institutions are now starting to map out those opportunities. Again, beyond the energy sector, starting to look at sustainability trends, core business sustainability trends, as a source of disruption, as a source of growth and innovation. So those are the 3 points I'd leave you with. Firstly, it's about execution. Secondly, we need to get a very clear sense of reality, because without that realistic baseline, very difficult to drive sustainability as a front foot play for growth and innovation. And finally, need to be very clear at starting the journey with a realistic map of the innovation opportunities to your sector, which in many cases are not available only to those engaged directly in energy and some of the more obvious usual suspects.
Thank you very much.